I woke up choking on dust. The air burned my lungs. Stone pressed against my chest, and somewhere nearby, people were screaming. I forced my eyes open. Half the city was gone. Buildings that should have stood proudly were nothing more than broken piles of stone. Fires stretched across the streets, and soldiers were desperately trying to push civilians toward the city gates. Then, the ground shook. A creature taller than the city's walls stepped through the smoke. Its body wasn't made of flesh. It looked like living crystal, every movement sending cracks of blue light through its body. One swing of its massive arm erased an entire watchtower. People ran. Knights charged. It didn't matter. Nothing could even slow it down. I tried crawling away when suddenly, my right arm started burning. A glowing symbol spread across my skin. The crystal giant froze. It slowly turned its head. Out of thousands of people, it looked directly at me. And somehow, I knew it wasn't trying to kill me. It recognized me. A few hours earlier, my name was Kael Arden. At least, it used to be. Back on Earth, I wasn't some soldier or martial artist. I wasn't a genius scientist either. I worked the night shift in a wildlife genetics laboratory. My job was simple: catalog DNA, preserve biological records, store genetic samples from species that no longer existed. When I was younger, I wanted to become someone who protected wildlife. Reality wasn't nearly as exciting. Instead of saving animals, I spent every night documenting everything humanity had already lost: extinct wolves, ancient birds, ocean creatures no one would ever see again. Every sample felt like another reminder that we always arrive too late. Still, I loved the work, even if nobody else cared. That night started like every other. Coffee, computer screens, cold fluorescent lights, nothing unusual, until one delivery changed everything. A transport team arrived carrying a sealed black container recovered from an excavation site. The paperwork barely explained anything. Unknown biological specimen, estimated age. Impossible. Nobody believed the dating results. Neither did I. Inside the container sat what looked like a smooth stone egg covered in silver veins. It wasn't fossilized. It almost looked alive. Every instrument in the room started behaving strangely. Temperature sensors failed. Magnetic readings spiked. Even the lights flickered. Naturally, everyone wanted to touch it. Unfortunately, so did I. The moment my fingers brushed its surface, everything stopped. No sound, no lights, no movement. It was like time itself had frozen. Then, the silver veins lit up, not around the room, inside my hand. Pain shot through my entire body. The laboratory disappeared beneath an explosion of white light. I never even had time to scream. When I opened my eyes again, someone was crying. Not quietly. The kind of crying someone makes after believing they've already lost everything. Warm hands grabbed mine. A woman's voice trembled beside me. "My son." I couldn't understand every word, but somehow I understood enough. The language wasn't familiar, yet the meaning reached me anyway. My vision slowly cleared. The ceiling above me wasn't concrete. Dark wooden beams crossed overhead. Sunlight spilled through tall windows, covered with embroidered curtains. The bed beneath me was softer than anything I'd ever slept on. A woman leaned over me. She couldn't have been older than 30. Long silver hair, deep emerald eyes. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept for days. Tears streamed down her face as she smiled. Behind her stood several servants. Some looked relieved, others didn't. One elderly man quietly slipped out of the room the moment I opened my eyes. That was strange. If the young master of the house had finally awakened, shouldn't everyone be celebrating? Instead, some of them looked nervous, almost disappointed. Then the headache came. It hit without warning. Thousands of unfamiliar memories crashed into my mind all at once. Different faces, different places, different names. I saw birthday celebrations, sword lessons, a massive estate, arguments between nobles, doctors, medicine, months spent lying unconscious. By the time the memories settled, I understood everything. Or at least, enough. This wasn't my body. I had become Rowan Vale, 10 years old, second son of House Vale, a noble family whose influence had been fading for years. The original Rowan had fallen into a mysterious illness months ago. Every physician had failed. Everyone believed he would never wake up again. Apparently, they had been right, because the boy named Rowan never woke up. I did. Recovering wasn't easy. The body felt incredibly weak. Walking across the room left me exhausted. Holding a spoon made my hands shake. Whatever illness Rowan suffered, it had nearly destroyed him. Over the next few days, I learned more about my new life. House Vale wasn't poor, but it wasn't powerful anymore either. Debts were piling up. Political enemies circled constantly. Even relatives had started preparing for the family's collapse. The worst part, my father barely visited. When he finally did, he simply looked at me for a few seconds before speaking. "So you survived." That was it. No hug, no relief, no questions. He turned around and walked away. I wasn't sure whether Rowan had always been ignored, or whether this family simply had bigger problems. Either way, something felt wrong. A week later, my caretaker helped me walk through the estate gardens for the first time. Fresh air felt amazing. Then, I noticed something strange. Birds. At least, I thought they were birds. Around every animal floated faint streams of colored light. A squirrel had tiny golden threads drifting behind it. Butterflies shimmered with pale blue sparks. Even insects carried faint, glowing shapes. I rubbed my eyes. The lights didn't disappear. In fact, they became clearer. "What are those?" I asked. The caretaker smiled. "You can already see echoes?" Echoes. Apparently, every living creature in this world carried something called an echo, a spiritual imprint formed through countless generations of life. Most people couldn't see them clearly. Only trained tamers could, and even they only saw faint traces. But what I was seeing wasn't normal, because I wasn't just seeing glowing light. I was seeing possibilities. One small bird landed on a nearby fence. The moment I looked at it, the world changed. Dozens of transparent images appeared around it. One version grew larger with steel-colored wings. Another developed blazing feathers. One became completely covered in crystal. Hundreds, thousands, countless futures surrounded a single tiny creature. I blinked. Everything vanished. The bird flew away as if nothing had happened. I stood frozen. What exactly had I just seen? That question was answered sooner than expected. A few days later, servants rushed through the estate carrying decorations. Everyone seemed unusually busy. When I asked why, my caretaker smiled. "Today is your echo ceremony." Every noble child underwent it around their 10th birthday. If you successfully formed a contract with an echo beast, your future was secured. If you failed, you'd spend your life as ordinary nobility. No glory, no influence, no real power. There was just one problem. Everyone expected me to fail. Rumors about my illness had spread everywhere. Guests whispered openly as they arrived. "So that's the sickly heir? He probably won't even stay conscious." What a disappointment. I ignored them. There wasn't much else I could do. The ceremony began inside a massive stone hall. Crystal pillars lined both sides of the room. One by one, young nobles stepped forward. Some bonded with wolves, others with hawks. One lucky child formed a contract with a massive horned bear. The crowd applauded loudly. Then, my name was called. The room became strangely quiet. I stepped toward the center. A crystal altar glowed beneath my feet. Several attendants released dozens of young echo beasts into the chamber. Each one wandered freely until choosing its future partner. Most immediately ignored me. Some even backed away. The whispers started again. I knew it. They can sense weakness. Then, something tiny stumbled through the doorway. It barely reached my ankle. Small, thin, orange fur. One ear bent awkwardly. Its tail looked almost comically oversized. The guests laughed. "A stray? Who let that thing inside? It isn't even worth contracting." The little creature limped toward me, then sat quietly beside my feet. The laughter only grew louder. But I wasn't looking at the animal. I was staring at everything surrounding it. Because unlike the others, this creature wasn't surrounded by dozens of futures. It was surrounded by thousands. Some ended almost immediately. Some faded into darkness. But one path, one single path, rose higher than all the others. I saw the tiny fox-like creature transform again and again, larger, stronger, covered in luminous markings, until finally, it stood beneath the stars like an ancient guardian overlooking an entire continent. The vision lasted only a second, but it was enough. Everyone else saw something worthless. I saw unlimited potential. Without hesitation, I knelt down and held out my hand. "I choose this one." The entire hall burst into laughter. Even the attendants looked horrified. Someone actually shouted, "He's doomed." The little creature gently touched my fingers. The contract began. Normally, A soft light appeared between beast and tamer. That wasn't what happened. A blinding wave of silver erupted across the hall. The altar cracked. Every crystal pillar started vibrating. Ancient symbols spread across my arm like living ink. The little fox cried out. The ceiling shook. Then, the ceremonial crystal exploded. Silence. Absolute silence. Every noble in the room stared at me. Not because I had failed, but because nobody had ever seen a contract like this before. Far away, beneath mountains no map dared name. Something enormous slowly opened a single glowing eye. It had been asleep for longer than kingdoms had existed. Now, for the first time in ages, it smiled, because somewhere in the world, someone had awakened the echo it had been waiting for.